Hey, today we're going to learn how to paint this beautiful little fall motif with acorns and a fall leaf. If we haven't met yet, I'm Viv, this is Art with Viv, and we are about to have some fun. So come on and join me. Once you get your fall motif traced out onto your watercolor paper, I'm using 140 pound here. It's actually on a block, and I'm using a number 12 Creative Mark Mimic Squirrel Hair brush. Mimic Faux Squirrel Hair. Anyway, it's a number 12 and it's by Creative Mark and it's the Mimic series. So you're going to wet that leaf with clean water. Then you're going to take a nice sort of yellowy green color and just drop it on there. We want this to be sort of the starting point for our leaf, but while it is still wet, we're going to add other fall colors to this green. First, we're going to get a nice base, and then we are going to add some nice fall colors, some roses and some oranges and burnt oranges. And if you are enjoying this, please don't forget to subscribe. Just hit the bell and then hit the notifications. So once you get your green on there, you're going to want to, I'm dabbing just a little bit of it up because I got it a little dark in some places and it was a little wet. So now I'm adding a little more of an olive green color. Again, while it's still wet, we're doing the wet on wet technique. And I'm just going to put in some other fall colors. Like I said before, some oranges. We're going to put in some burnt oranges maybe, some nice maroons or rose colors, whatever you feel like is fall, that says fall to you. This is the palette I chose, but you can choose whatever palette you want, whatever type of colors you want for it's your leaf, doggone it, and you paint that thing the way you want to. There are no rules with us. We are just having fun. That's all we want to do, is just have some fun. So as you see, I just keep sort of charging the colors in there. Where it's getting a little bit too wet, there's a lot of water on the paper, I'm just taking my brush and drying it off on the paper towel, and then just coming in while it's just damp and lifting some of that up. Now in some spots I'm coming back, adding a few more colors where I want it to be a little more bright. Now we're going to let that dry completely. I know it's frustrating when you have to let it dry. You can either wait for that leaf to dry, or you can go ahead while the leaf is drying and start on your acorn body. I let it dry just because I'm fancy like that. I'm fancy like that. So now I have wet that acorn body with clean water, although my water doesn't look too clean. It looked a little peachy there, but it doesn't matter because we're going to cover it up with these browns. Take a lighter, more yellow brown, mix it with some more of the red, like a reddish brown. You can even take some burnt orange and mix it with maybe a sienna or a burnt umber to get a deep brown. And then you're just going to drop those in there just like you did with the leaf. And you're going to drop those colors and let them blend. The thing that I'm paying attention to with the acorns is where the light is going to hit it. Where the light hits it, I want it to be like the lighter, more yellow brown. Where the shadows are, that's where I'm putting in that darker orange brown. So just keep the shadows and light in mind as you're putting your first layer of colors in there. And again, if you don't want brown acorns, if you want green acorns, do green. If you want bright orange acorns, do bright orange. These are just the colors that I have chosen for my acorns. And you notice I am dabbing a little bit of green in there. Now you're going to let that dry. Let that completely dry. Now we are back. It's completely dry. And I am going to start on the caps. I'm just putting in a nice sort of, it's going to be sort of a greenish, brownish, yellowish brown, whatever you want to call it, undercoat. And I've just taken some of that really light green that we used as the base for the leaf and just putting a little bit of brown in with it, just a touch of the brown. I'm wetting down the little cap area, and then I'm just putting in that color. That is going to be our base color, just like all before. We're putting in our base. We're just getting the very bottom part. We're trying to pay attention where shadows are and where light is. Let that dry. Just let it dry. Now, it's dry, and we are going to come back and work on the leaf. Now for the leaf, I am wetting just a small little section at a time. And what I'm doing is I'm painting in between the veins, but I'm leaving the veins dry. You want those veins to stay dry. And you're going to paint around them with a negative painting technique. So I'm painting the sections that are in between the veins while I'm leaving the veins dry, so that they will be a lighter color than those sections, and they'll pop out, they'll stand out. It's just another negative painting technique that is so useful. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm painting around my veins, leaving the veins dry, and just painting the sections in between. I'm wetting it first, and then I'm coming back in and I'm adding more color so it deepens the color of the leaf. Now I'm also trying to add, just in the sections, for instance, if it's a green section, when I wet the paper, I'm going to add green to that section. Where the underlying color is, I'm going to try to stay in that color family. I'm not going to put green over the red because it'll just turn brown or grayish. So if you're painting in a red section between the veins, apply more reddish paint, more orange paint. Has to be red or orange, or a little bit of yellow. If you're painting over a green section, then only add green paint, just to keep it clear and to keep from muddying up your leaf color. And again, we are painting around each one of those veins, so we're just sort of painting in between them and letting the veins stay dry. So I'm going to let you watch just for a little bit and enjoy some music, and I will return shortly. Okay, we are working our way to the end of this leaf. And you see what I've done. I've left the veins a lighter color. I've painted around them, painted in the sections in between them, and it's given the leaf a more defined look. Now we're gonna let that dry completely. It's a lot of drying here. You can use a blow dryer if you'd like. I'm just letting it dry by natural air. But if you would like, use a blow dryer to speed up the process. So now I'm going back in to the body of my acorns. I'm just sort of dampening it up, and I'm spreading in some of the darker browns. I'm darkening up where I see shadows in the reference photo. If you're interested in getting the outline drawing in the reference photo, then consider joining the Sweet Art Squad. That is just a membership for my YouTube followers. You pay $5 a month, you get the videos that I put on YouTube, plus you will get the outline drawings and the supply sheet along with that. It's a pretty good deal for $5 a month. You can't really beat it. So if you're interested in getting the outline drawing and the supply sheet, then I suggest you pop on over there, and I will leave a link in the description. So now you see I've wet it, and I am putting in some darker sort of streaks of the brown, and I've also put in some green. And then where I want it to be lighter, I'm drying my brush off onto the paper towel, and then I'm coming back in with that damp dry brush and picking some of the paint up, staying with that pattern of striations or little lines. So that gives the acorn some texture. And when I varied the color in there as well, so that it looks nice. It's not all just brown streaks. We've got a little green in there. Then we're going to do the same thing with this next acorn. I've dampened it up some. I don't want it really, really sloppy wet. I just want that acorn body to be damp. And then I am going to go ahead. This one has a little belly button that's facing us, so I'm just going to darken in that center of the belly button and the little shadow around it. And then I'm going to start bringing those marks, those striations, texture marks, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to start bringing those toward the belly button, and I'm following the curve. Follow the curve of how the acorn is rounded, and think about how when light hits it, how the light will slide across the surface, and where the most light will be the lightest and the shiniest. Where there's less light, of course, there'll be a shadow. So that's what you want to think about if you want to give it some three-dimensional quality. Now I'm coming in with a dark brown. You could use like a sepia, a burnt umber, a blue and sepia mix, or a blue and burnt umber mix for a really dark color. And I'm just adding some shadows right around where the cap meets the body of the acorn. It gives a little separation, plus there's just a small tiny shadow there. Also, this one has a little outie belly button, so I'm making little rings around his belly button. I bet you didn't know acorns had belly buttons. Well, mine do. If yours don't, well, I don't know what to tell you, but when I paint acorns, I see belly buttons. So now I'm adding the shadow to this other one. What I've done is I've just painted that straight on, and then I took my damp brush and just softened the edge of that. That's all I did to those shadows. Now we're going to work on doing the texture, those little scales that are on that cap. And what I'm doing is I'm just drawing some upside down C's or U's, or you could call them little upside down rainbows. And I'm making the edge darker, and then I'm taking clean water and just fanning those out, just blending it out so it gets lighter toward the top. So the little scales will be darker around the bottom edge, around that curve. Then you'll add a little bit of water and lighten it toward the top, toward the wide part of the C. And then you're just going to repeat that. You're going to overlap those as you go. So it sort of looks almost like fish scales. So I'm going to let you watch. And by the way, I am using a number 20, it's a 00 size spotter brush to put this in. It's really tiny, and this is a really sort of tiny area, so that's what I'm using. I'm making it darker on the edges, blending it out with clean water toward the wide part of the C, toward the top part. I'm also adding a little green in with the brown, and just making that a nice variation. So I'm going to be quiet, let you watch so that you can see. Also add in some darker shadows in some places, and then I will be back shortly. So I'm showed you how to do one side, and I'm not going to show you how to do the other acorn. It's the same exact process. So now, through the magic of video, we've let everything dry and we have the acorn caps painted in, and now we're coming in, darkening in some of the shadows, and we are working on dry paper now. We have let this dry once we got the acorn caps on, and we're just going to come in and start adding some shadows and some details. Now on the leaf back here in the background, I'm taking sort of a burnt orange with a little bit of deep brown mixed with it, and I'm going along the edge of some of those veins so that it looks like there's a shadow in there, and I'm painting it onto dry paper. But then I'm taking my paintbrush, rinsing it out, and with some clean water, I'm softening the edge of those shadows so that they're not so harsh, and just blending them out just slightly. I'm not blending it across the whole section. I'm just blending it right there at the edge of the shadow, right at the edge of the vein. So we're going to do that, put that shadow work in there, and again that starts to pop that vein out. It makes the leaf look more three-dimensional. It just gives it a nice look. Remember, shadow and light, those are your friends. That's what makes things look three-dimensional in your two-dimensional paintings, is the way that you handle the shadow and light. So any chance you get, study light, study how it hits objects, study where the shadows are, where the highlights are, how the shadows change from dark to light in some areas, the colors of the shadows. Just become a student of light if you want to paint realistic three-dimensional type paintings. And that is my best advice for you, to do that. And I'm just going to continue on. I'm going to let you watch. We're just adding shadows to the veins here, and I will be back with you shortly. I apologize for that change of light where it gets really bright like it is now and then it gets dark. What is happening is I have the window shades open, so the sun is going in and out behind clouds. So when it's really bright like this, the sun is out. When it gets a little bit darker, that means it is hiding behind a cloud. So anyway, we're finishing up the veins, going around the shadows work of the veins, and then we are going to start on the body of the acorns, adding another layer. They are completely dry, so once we finish these last little veins up, we'll work on that. We're going to use some dark brown, some red browns, maybe some burnt orange on those acorn bodies. Here we go, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to start mixing up my browns, and I am going to go ahead in here and just start adding shadows, darkening up some of those lines that we made previously, going right back over those. I'm going to add a few more around the center part here, the little navel, the little belly button, sort of, and make those lines radiate from that center part of that belly button. And as I am adding those lines, though, I'm not leaving them just hard, harsh marks. I'm coming back with clean water and softening those lines so that they're very soft and they're not just really hard. They don't have a lot of harsh edges. I'm paying attention to where I see shadows. I'm putting the darker browns there, and where there is a little bit of glare or a little bit of sheen or shine, I'm leaving those areas light. And I'm just working my way around with dark browns in the darkest areas and more of the reddish brown in sort of the mid-tone areas. As I move around, I'm looking at my reference photo to make sure I'm getting my shadows in the correct spot, or at least as close as I can. And I'm also softening those lines with clean water as I go around. I'll put a few of the marks down, then I'll go clean my brush, and then I'll come back and start softening them. And that's how we're going to work our way around the body of this acorn. We're going to do the same thing to the second acorn. So I'm just going to let you watch, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, so we're coming toward the end of this part of this section, and I'm just sort of adding a few more bits of brown in there and yellow browns, and then I'm coming back with my brush, wet and smoothing it out, just making sure that it's nice and soft. And then we let that dry. Once you let it dry, I'm taking a very small scrubber brush, and in the areas where I see a lot of sort of sheen or shine, I'm taking my scrubber brush, wetting it, and then just gently scrubbing some of the paint up, and then I'm dabbing it up with my paper towel, just picking it up with the paper towel. And this is where I'm gonna put my highlights. This is how I'm highlighting it, just to give it a little bit more contrast and a little shine to that shell of the acorn. Just remember to be gentle, especially if you're using a scrubber brush like I'm using, because that scrubber brush that I'm using, it really pulls the paint up quickly and it can damage your paper if you press too hard. So be really careful depending on what kind of scrubber brush. I'm also adding some highlights right around the edge of the little acorn cap, and I'm also going to add highlights on the top edge of that acorn cap. I'm going to go into the leaves, the leaf. There's only one leaf. I'm going to go into the leaf and pull up some of that just to lighten it up in certain areas, so that it has a little bit more of a three-dimensional look, has a little bit of a more of a contrast. And not everywhere, just in some areas where I want it to be lighter. And remember to rinse your brush off, your scrubber brush, in between each little section, so you don't carry one color paint into the next section. You don't want to do that. Use a light touch if you're using a scrubber brush like I'm using, and make sure to clean it up. Pick up that excess that you've scraped up, pulled up with your scrubber, with your paper towel or tissue, whatever you have. And then we are going to do that second acorn once we get finished with the leaf. Getting a few more highlights in there, and we are almost finished. Now you can take this little motif, you can make it smaller on your computer, you can put it on place card settings for Thanksgiving if you want. You can put it on a greeting card, a bookmark. There's all kinds of things you could do with this design. This is a really versatile design, and you could put it on a lot of different crafts and things like that. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're painting, of ways you could use it. Now I am just going to work on that last acorn body, putting in those highlights. You see, I'm just sort of scrubbing in there where the light really hits it and the light is reflecting back a little bit of shine. And just trying to be as gentle as I can so I don't tear my paper up. And doing that especially in between the darker sections. That just gives it a little bit more of a realistic look. And we're almost finished. The last thing we probably need to do, maybe let's put a shadow on it. That's optional. And I think we might put a shadow on it. So let me get my paint back out. What I'm going to do is just wet the area right under the acorns and the leaf. And then I am going to add a mixture of sort of a little bit of purple, a little bit of blue, a little bit of brown. It's just a gray. It's a gray color. And I'm just going to mix that up and drop it in there while that area is still wet. Remember, when you're doing a shadow, that the shadows are darkest right underneath the object that is casting the shadow, and they get lighter as they fade out into the light. As they come out from under that object, it'll get lighter onto the table or wherever these happen to be laying. So I am softening up that edge, adding a little bit more water so that the edge that's under the light is lighter, and there you go. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Please subscribe, hit the notification button, and I will see you next week.